also claim that non-students, outside agitators, are working with the students in the building. And that is why they called in the police. The police department and the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, held a press conference earlier today where they talked about this as well. They said that they believed that people involved were not students and could be dangerous to the people on campus. And because they are not affiliated with the campus, are breaking the law, and they listed numerous charges that they were going to attempt to charge them with if they were there. They appealed to the parents of the students, actually asking them to call their students and talk to the students who are on the campus, warning that they could be criminally charged, no longer just with trespassing, but with breaking and entering and other charges like that. This is what they say. They wanted to get the students out of the way. But when you talk to people on the sidelines here, I ran into some teachers who were huddled around a radio listening to a live broadcast from students inside the campus. And the teachers, the professors, were horrified that the students, that the administration had called the police in. They are not buying that. They say these are our students. Those are the students they're going after. So they were very concerned and came out specifically to bear witness to what's happening here, along with a lot of young people that we see here. But also, it's interesting, a lot of people are really afraid to talk to us. You notice a lot of young people and the demonstrators are wearing masks. We don't know how many are students. There's a lot of student housing around here, and even people who go to school at Columbia aren't being allowed back on the campus right now because of the lockdown situation. And the students who are on campus were advised to stay in their dormitories and not come out. In the run-up to this, clearly the university was prepping everyone for this mass takeover by the police.
Kristen, do stay with us as we update our viewers who might just be joining us on what's been happening, these really important developments at Columbia University in New York. This is Al Jazeera, and you are watching live pictures from Columbia University, where in the past 45 minutes, we have seen police officers moving into, climbing up and entering through a window at the historic Hamilton Hall in Columbia University. That's where a group of students, we don't know how many exactly, but a group of students barricaded themselves inside Hamilton Hall on Monday evening to continue to protest against Israel's war on Gaza. They said that they had renamed Hamilton Hall Hind Hall after the 6-year-old Palestinian girl in Gaza who was killed by Israeli forces while on the phone with emergency paramedics, begging them to come and save her, and whose phone call went viral around the world. There is a heavy police presence at Columbia University after university authorities called police saying that they were agitators who had infiltrated this protest. Let's bring our correspondent, Kristen Salumi, back in. She is one of 2 correspondents that we have outside Columbia University at different points outside the university, covering this ongoing situation for us. And Kristen, you know, you were telling us about the university statement saying that there are agitators, and our correspondent Teresa Bo was telling earlier that, you know, she's been speaking to many protesters over the course of days of reporting, as you have. For you, it's been weeks now covering these protests in Columbia, and they say, you know, that these claims of infiltrators is simply not true. And what's been really interesting, not just at Columbia, but other universities across America, is that students themselves are being charged, students and professors themselves are being charged with trespassing, which they say is an absolutely bizarre charge. Trespassing somewhere where you go or you work.
Yeah, that's right. And Columbia University, of course, has this long history of student demonstrations in the very same hall where the students are being arrested, where they took over the building in 1968. Demonstrators did the same thing there. So they see this as continuing a tradition. And it happened again with the apartheid in South Africa. There were demonstrations at the same spot. So, and Columbia University has a law school. It's the home to the Knight First Amendment Institute. And the faculty from the law school and the Knight First Amendment Institute have all come out on the side of the demonstrators, saying that, you know, they've been peaceful, especially when the first arrest came along. It was, you know, a peaceful encampment where people were set up, and by the police department's own statements, they themselves said that the demonstrators had not done anything violent per se. So from within the campus, you have on the one hand the administration and the Board of Trustees who clearly are under pressure from leaders of the city and the state and the federal government to clamp down on this and get it under control. But within the Columbia community, I'm not saying all faculty members support the demonstrators, but certainly there has been a majority of, just by the Senate vote that was taken, this faculty Senate vote, was very critical of the fact that police were used to handle a situation. University faculty see this as their community, as their students. This is a teachable moment, many of them will say, when they can, you know, encourage discussions and debate and the expression of free speech.
Yeah.
And yet it was just a blanket shutdown. So
Absolutely.
a lot of feeling that the negotiations haven't been in good faith.
But, you know, Kristen, I think we've seen since the war on Gaza began, certainly before, but it's been heightened since the war on Gaza began, that the exception to free speech, even at universities, seems to be on Palestine.
Well, I don't recall any arrests during the South African apartheid divest movement. You know, this really seemed to trigger a response, not only here at Columbia, but elsewhere. And there's a lot of sympathy for Israel and for what happened there. There's a lot of, you know, strong feelings when Israel is threatened. People here have family there. There's a lot of connections between Israel and New York in particular. So there is sympathy there. But there's also growing awareness of what's happening in Gaza and the pictures that have been coming from that conflict. And again, this is an educational setting where people are learning about what's happening in the world. And if you're being taught about human rights, if you're being taught about free speech, people are saying, why can't we talk about this? Why can't we use our voices to protest? And that's what we've been seeing happening.
And Kristen, you know, to your point about apartheid, our correspondent Rob McBride, who's been covering the protests at the University of California, Los Angeles, he interviewed a history professor a few hours ago live in one of our bulletins, and he was talking about how in all of his years of being part of protests in America, including against apartheid, he hasn't seen something like this, so that was really interesting. You've covered the protests in America since the war on Gaza began, and especially the ones at universities. Kristen, just lastly, how would you characterize what you're seeing tonight at Columbia in the context of what's been happening over the last few weeks?
You know, it's a great question because the demonstrations in New York started from not long after October 7th. There has actually been weekly, in some cases many days a week, there have been protests where people have come to the streets, but they weren't getting covered. They weren't getting a lot of attention unless they were a big one where they shut down Grand Central and people were arrested there. Or they shut down the Brooklyn Bridge. When those things would happen, they would get some attention, they would get some coverage. But people were coming out almost daily. As the longer the war has continued, the more frequent those demonstrations became. But again, the media sort of lost interest. It wasn't until the college students got involved that that they started paying attention again. So while people can be critical of the students and their methods, and I've heard that actually from some of the Jewish students I spoke to here at Columbia, actually had some sympathy for the plight of Gazans in this conflict, but they felt that the students were going about it wrong, or they didn't like the chant of Intifada or from the river to the sea because they felt like it was directed at them and it was
Right.
It was anti-Semitic in nature.
Yeah, even though from the river to the sea is actually from Benjamin
things started
Netanyahu's
happening
own
here, it wasn't
Likud party.
getting right. They're different sides of this debate see it differently, but here in some circles, if you say Intifada, if you say from the river to the sea, that is seen as anti-Zionist. And not more than anti-Zionist,
Yeah.
it's anti-Semitic by some people here. And I've seen some really great debates on the sidelines here of people debating that.
Yeah.
But clearly that got attention and got the media back to covering the story when the college campuses got involved.
Yeah, Kristen, thank you so much for that. For now, that's Kristen Salumi joining us live from Columbia University in New York. We're going to go back to our other correspondent who's live at a different location at Columbia. Teresa Bo is joining us. And Teresa, if you can just, bring us up to date with what's been happening there over the past hour. And, we're watching the live shot of that window of the historic Hamilton Hall with police inside, students who've barricaded themselves inside, and we don't know what's happening there.
Can you talk to whoever this? All right, they call back and talk to them.
Well, certainly. We're right here across from where the window where at least 50 police officers went inside Hamilton Hall. It's not clear what is happening there right now, but student protesters have been outside, in a way protecting those who are inside, who have barricaded themselves inside Hamilton Hall. They renamed that hall after a Palestinian girl, the 6-year-old Palestinian girl that was killed by the military. And then just about an hour ago, we started seeing massive police presence. They started coming towards where we are from the northern side of the avenue and from the southern part of the avenue. And then just dozens and dozens of police officers came here. Let me bring you in, and we're going to talk to one of the students that has been outside showing support for those who are inside. And he does not want his name disclosed, but he's been here all day. He's been following what's been happening with the students all day. So what can you tell us is happening inside? What have you heard from your classmates, your other students who are inside?
Right, so like you said, a lot of the students went in to Hamilton Hall yesterday, deoccupied and reoccupied it as Hind Hall. They were there all day long. All of us were hoping that the administration would behave like adults and negotiate in good faith with the students and find a compromise, find a way forward to get these students safely back to their classes where they belong. But a lot of us were very disappointed, obviously, and shocked to see the police return to our campus, an American institution where freedom of speech and freedom of expression are supposed to be prized. Earlier today, via social networks, we all were told that they expected the police to come. So we came out here to demonstrate our support for me personally, for the American values that I believe in. And when we arrived, there were students kind of massing around the gates behind me, you see. Eventually, the police arrived and started pushing people back. About 40 or 50 students went arm in arm and tried to block the gate. The police then came. Some of them behaved like professionals. Others were pushing and shoving and escalating the situation. They took a lot of those students away in zip ties. And then eventually they pushed the rest of us out of the way so they could bring in the vehicle that you see to my right. That vehicle moved forward to where it is now. They used the ladder system. They probably could use a normal ladder, but decided instead to use that vehicle to breach the window into Hamilton Hall or Hind Hall. And from there they moved in. From what we're told from inside, there are reports that they used tear gas in an enclosed space, which doesn't seem tactically sound or responsible when dealing with unarmed student protesters.
Have you heard from inside what is happening inside? Because we cannot see anything from here, from where we are right now. But maybe you are in touch with other students inside. Do you know what is going on?
Right. So from what we heard from inside, there were students who were knocked on, there was at least one student who was knocked unconscious by the police. Again, that's the reporting that we're getting from inside, and there was tear gas deployed. A lot of the students apparently are being brought out in zip ties via buses to the south of the campus. But it sounds like the students were sitting there. They were probably expecting to be arrested and were willing to be arrested for what they believe in, which is something that, again, we should applaud here in America. That's true courage in there, those students who decided they wanted to stand for what they believed in, and all these police officers with all their equipment knocking down the door to take them away.
One of the things that the New York Police Department is saying is that the students inside were infiltrated by outsiders, that this is something extremely dangerous. Is this true? I mean, is this something that has happened? Is just students in there? What can you tell us about who is inside?
A month ago, those students were sitting in classes like the rest of us. The people who are in there right now, to the best of my knowledge, are all students who decided that they wanted to take a stand and actually demonstrate leadership for the rest of the country and for students around the world. I haven't heard of any infiltration into the camps. The only thing that happened was sometimes there would be some outside people who would come and try to, change the narrative. Like there's a Proud Boy that came in, other people trying to spread a different narrative. But the students were very responsible and they behaved like very professionally in de-escalating those situations and refocusing the narrative on Gaza as they were attempting to. Any of these narratives that are trying to spread fear about who the students are, I recommend you speak to one of the students if you get a chance, the Palestinian students or the Jewish students who were arrested last week, or the Jewish students who are probably being arrested right now, and you can hear from them what kind of motivation, what kind of movement they are, which is peaceful, and there was no infiltration, from my understanding, of any kind of outside organization.
You as a student, you're being part of this movement, of these protests to shed light of what is happening in Gaza, to the war on Gaza, to the killing in Gaza. What would you like to say to the American public? What would you like to say to American politicians? What would you like to tell President Biden about what is happening here right now?
Right. I want to start by saying I don't want to distract attention away from Gaza, which is the real focus of all these students here. But personally, as a student, as an American, I'm horrified by the decision-making process here. This isn't Moscow. This isn't Tehran. This is New York City. We should be able to protest peaceably in order to talk to people about what we have, what the issues we have with what's going on on our campus around the world, without fear of our campus being militarized by police and occupied and being pushed away from our classes for no real reason. The students there, they demonstrated incredible courage, and they motivated people around the country to do the same. And I was hoping that the administration here would follow their lead and do something constructive. Unfortunately, they started bringing in cops last week. The rest of the country followed their lead, brought in cops. They were negotiating constructively earlier in the week and gave up on that. I was hoping they would move back to the negotiating table, but instead they decided to do this. So for everyone that grew up in America, in elementary school, middle school, and learned about American values and history of the American Revolution, or any other thing that you prize as American, our values, I would say hopefully in the future this doesn't happen again. Hopefully we remember who we are, and we stand up for people who want to protest peacefully in order to address something they see going on in the world.
Thank you very much. So we remain here, right outside of Columbia University, just right in front of the door where around 50 police officers enter Hamilton Hall. It's not clear what went on there. We just heard some of the information that students outside are getting from what is happening inside. But we are remaining here, monitoring the situation, seeing the dozens and dozens of police officers that have showed up here, watching how at least 50 of them entered through that window, probably to evict the students that are currently inside. Students have been facing the risks of suspension, of expulsion. Now they're facing arrest. So we're going to have to see what happens next, but we'll be here and we'll keep you updated with the latest of what's going on here outside Columbia University.
Yeah, no doubt, Teresa. Thank